Bonjour. Hello. Mon nom est Marvin Rotrand. Je suis le directeur national de la Ligue des droits de la personne de B'nai Brith Canada. My name is Marvin Rotrand. I'm the national director for the League for Human Rights of B'nai Brith Canada. Aujourd'hui, B'nai Brith va rendre public son Audit 2022 des incidents antisémites au Canada, un document très, très important. Le format pour aujourd'hui va être le suivant. Le directeur général de B'nai Brith, M. Michael Mostyn, va commencer. Après, ça va être moi. Et puis, M. David Matus, qui est le président de notre société de loi Matus. Et je dois mentionner la présence de trois membres du Parlement, M. Anthony Housefather, député de Montréal, qui représente le Parti libéral, suivi par Mme Melissa Lantsman, membre du Parti conservateur du Canada, qui représente Thornhill, et M. Alistair MacGregor, qui représente le nouveau Parti démocratique, qui représente la circonscription de Cowichan, Malahat, Langford, à Colombie-Britannique. So we are today going to make an important announcement. The 2022 audit for B'nai Brith is now public. The order for speech today is Michael Mostyn, the CEO of B'nai Brith, followed by myself, followed by Mr. David Matus of our Matus Law Society. And I welcome three members of Parliament who are here for this nonpartisan press conference and who will speak in the following order. Mr. Anthony Housefather for the Liberal Party of Canada, Ms. Melissa Lantsman for the Conservative Party of Canada, and Mr. Alistair MacGregor for the New Democratic Party. J'invite Mr. Michael Mostyn to prendre la parole.
Good morning. My name is Michael Mostyn, Chief Executive Officer of B'nai Brith Canada. I'm pleased to be joined this morning in the presentation of the 2022 Annual Audit of Anti-Semitic Incidents by Marvin Rotrand, National Director of B'nai Brith's League for Human Rights, and David Matus, Senior Legal Counsel to B'nai Brith Canada. We're also honored to be joined by members of Parliament representing multiple political parties, the Liberals, the Conservatives, and the NDP, who care about the state of anti-Semitism in our country and are committed to doing something about it. Thank you, MPs Anthony Housefather, Melissa Lantsman, and Alistair MacGregor for participating in this press conference with us today. B'nai Brith and its League for Human Rights are Canada's most senior Jewish human rights organization, having an extensive presence throughout our country since our founding back in 1875. The League has been publishing its audit of anti-Semitic incidents since 1982 in order to track the trend lines for this particular form of hatred, so that we can better understand how we are doing as a society and better learn how to confront it. Although all audits of this kind represent an underreporting, we thank all the Canadians who continue to use our anti-hate app, hotline, and online reporting so that these instances can be documented and so that B'nai Brith can make best efforts to counter this hate. We also thank police forces across the country for sharing their own statistics to help better inform our audit. Allow me to begin with a broad overview before passing the mic to my colleagues for their further analysis. There were 2,769 recorded incidents of anti-Semitism in 2022, a slight but almost insignificant drop of 1.1% from last year's audit. 2,056 of those incidents took place online, representing over 74% of the total. Of the in-person incidents, nearly 85% constituted anti-Semitic harassment. While most provinces trended downwards last year, Ontario jumped over 64% in incidents since 2021. Acts of vandalism increased from 264 to 404, while in-person harassment dropped from 367 to 284 in 2022. There was also a drop from 75 acts of violence to 25 last year. It must be recalled, however, that many of the 75 acts of violence in 2021 were connected to the May conflict between Hamas and Israel, which acted as a trigger against Canadian Jewry. 25 acts of violence in 2022 still represents a disturbing and elevated level of violence above the historical norm in Canada. For further analysis of the numbers, I'd like to now turn to Marvin Rotrand, National Director for the League for Human Rights.
Thank you, Michael. Merci, Michael. As my colleague indicated, we observed a decline of 1.1% in incidents this year, dropped from 2,799 recorded in 2021 to 2,769. We don't take a great deal of joy in that. It is the second highest number of incidents we have recorded in the 41 years that we have been auditing. In 2020, the number of incidents was 2,610. A decade ago, in 2012, the number of incidents were 1,345. In a decade, the number of incidents have increased by nearly 106%. One of the most evident features is that hate has moved online. The haters have discovered anonymity and the ability to reach a large audience and spread misinformation and disinformation. Every year, there has been an increase in online hate. This year, our numbers reached essentially the same figure as 2021, 2,056 incidents online. The level of online hate underscores the need for legislation that can effectively blunt online hate. All provinces except Saskatchewan and Ontario observed a decline in incidents. As Michael mentioned, the number of incidents in Ontario mushroomed by 64.8% from 821 to 1,353. However, 2021 was an anomaly in Ontario, the lowest number it had recorded in many, many years. The average has been closer to 1,100. There were 1,130, for example, in 2020. This is worrisome. But on the other hand, Ontario was the first province to implement the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism, and there's a greater recognition of anti-Semitism by civil servants and law enforcement in Ontario. It's a bit of a paradox. The numbers go up before they go down. What we have seen this year, however, is more vandalism, a jump to 404 incidents. Synagogues and other Jewish institutional buildings were defaced in many locations. In the Kitchener-Waterloo-Guelph area, there were 7 incidents in 1 month of swastikas and other hate symbols on synagogues. Violence decreased from 75 to 25, but it is still far higher than what we've recorded in past years. And there was a very worrisome case in Hamilton of an attempted home invasion in which a Jewish person was threatened. This year, British Columbia saw a drop from 409 to 242 incidents. However, British Columbia experienced a very frightening, credible threat to the Victoria Jewish Film Festival in November that required major police intervention. The number recorded in British Columbia in 2022 surpasses that of 2020. Alberta saw a decline from 148 to 120 incidents. There were only 93 in 2020. Manitoba had a good year in terms of our recording. The number of incidents decreased from 223 to 51. That's actually lower than Manitoba recorded in 2019 and 2020. It's the best result in the country. And we congratulate all the members of the Manitoba legislature who on several occasions discussed anti-Semitism and who not once but twice adopted the IRA definition, once by order of council and once by motion in the legislature. Quebec worried us in 2021, producing the largest number of anti-Semitic incidents, even though the population was 60% lower than Ontario's. This year, Quebec drops 13% from 828 incidents to 722. However, that's still higher than Quebec's norm the last number of years. In 2020, there were 686 incidents. The good news, if I can put it this way in Quebec, is the number of violent incidents decreased from 36 to 7. The Maritimes dropped from 80 to 56 incidents. That's minus 30%. 39 of those incidents were in New Brunswick, and they were mostly online hate related to anti-vax protests and misused the Star of David and displayed hate symbols. There were many positives this year. IRA was adopted by Alberta, Manitoba, New Brunswick, and Saskatchewan. The government of Canada issued a very strong report, Malmo +1, indicating that it was moving to translate its bold promises into actual action. The special envoy to preserve Holocaust remembrance and combat anti-Semitism became a permanent position at the end of 2021, but now has received funding. Bill C-19 that criminalizes Holocaust denial was adopted. Ontario said that it would extend Holocaust education to elementary school as of the 2023-2024 academic year. I note the contributions of Minister Stephen Lecce to fighting anti-Semitism. The minister indicated that 90% of anti-Semitic incidents in Ontario schools are at middle schools, and a large number of students were graduating without knowing anything about the Holocaust. Major police departments, including the RCMP, the OPP, Vancouver, and Toronto, this year liberalized uniform rules to accommodate candidates wearing religious symbols, including a kippah. B'nai Brith launched Jewish Heritage Month in May of 2022 and received the support of 42 partners, including all of Canada's major cities, who adopted motions to recognize the contributions of Jews to Canada. There were many negatives, however. I've mentioned the anti-vax protests in which swastikas were displayed, the Star of David was misused, and a great deal of trauma done to the Jewish community. I don't have to mention the name Laith Marouf for Canadians to realize how hateful his tweets and social media presence was, and the fact that the government of Canada was forced to react and to cut funding to the organization for which he was associated with. The perspective for 2023, we're hopeful. Our multicultural forums launched in 2022 had over 2,000 participants across Canada. We are working with the Black community and the Asian community for events to be held in May and June. We're hopeful that other provinces will adopt IRA and that major cities and provinces that have not will follow the example of Vancouver and Richmond in British Columbia, which last November and this past February adopted IRA. But antisemitism is still with us. Je termine en français pour dire les chiffres en Québec sont beaucoup améliorés en comparaison avec 2022. Le nombre des incidences en 2022 était 828, en 2021 était 828, en 2022 722, qui est une diminution de 13%. Mais c'est toujours un chiffre qui est inacceptable, qui inclut 7 incidences de violence. Et au Québec, en 2022, il y a 34 actes où il y a des attaques contre les institutions et les synagogues juives. Mais avoir dit ça, je dois noter la coopération du gouvernement du Québec, le gouvernement Legault, avec lequel on a des grandes différences sur la loi 21 et la loi 86, était toujours là pour dialoguer avec nous autres. Et on va travailler avec eux comme partenaires, comme on va faire avec les autres provinces. I thank you for your time this morning, and I invite David Matus from our Matus Law Society to take the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. Statistics Canada Police Reported Hate Crimes for 2021 reports that for hate groups targeting racialized or religious groups, the rate of police reported hate crimes targeting the Jewish population was 145 incidents per 100,000 population. The next highest rate was hate crimes targeting the Black population, 41 incidents per 100,000 population. Third was the Arab and West Asian populations at 17 incidents per 1,000 population. Fourth was the East and Southeast Asian population at 9 incidents per 100,000 population. Fifth was the Muslim population at 8 incidents per 100,000 population. On a per capita basis, the Jewish population is the most victimized, racialized, or religious community by far. The Jewish community victimization is a multiple of 3.5 times greater than that of the next most victimized group, the Black population. Jewish victimization is 8.5 times greater than that of the Arab and West Asian population, 16 times greater than that of the East and Southeast Asian populations, and 18 times greater than that of the Muslim population. If you are Jewish, you're far more likely to be a victim of a hate crime than if you are a member of any other racialized or religious group. The differences are not just differences in numbers. They are differences in orders of magnitude. The differences are not just digits, they're multiples. The number of incidents the audit reports, as we've heard, is 2,069. The figure for 2021 was 2,799. We can see that there's a big difference between police-reported incidents and total incidents. For 221, the difference between anti-Semitic incidents reported by the audit and police-reported hate crimes is 2654. If we extrapolate the decrease from the audit in incidents to police-reported hate crimes in 2022, we see in the audit the difference for 2022 between anti-Semitic incidents reported by the audit and police-reported hate crimes would be 2626. Police-reported hate crimes are, therefore, the tip of the iceberg. Police-reported anti-Semitic hate crimes represent about 5% of total anti-Semitic incidents reported by the audit. The audit-reported incidents are themselves, as we've heard, an undercount. The audit does not include in the total every incident reported to B'nai Brith. B'nai Brith has a rigorous verification process, and not every incident comes to the attention of B'nai Brith. In a nutshell, anti-Semitism in Canada is a big problem. On a per capita basis, the biggest problem by far amongst racialized and religious communities. The response to the problem should be commensurate with the dimensions of the problem. Thank you.
I now invite Anthony Housefather, member of the Liberal Party and member for Mount Royal, to take the floor.
Merci beaucoup, Marvin. Merci beaucoup, Michael. Merci beaucoup, David. C'est vraiment apprécié que B'nai Brith fait cet audit chaque année parce qu'on a besoin des faits. Quand on parle de l'antisémitisme, quand on parle de la haine. Puis B'nai Brith nous offre les statistiques qui sont probablement les plus bonifiées dans tout le pays. Et j'aimerais aussi remercier Melissa puis Alistair d'être ici parce qu'il faut attaquer l'antisémitisme dans une manière non partisane. And we need all political parties and everybody to be involved in the fight against anti-Semitism because it's all of our fight. One of the things that is kind of a paradox is that we live in one of the countries with the lowest rates of anti-Semitism in the entire world. When you ask Canada and Canadians what their most admired groups are, Jews usually come near the top, especially when you look at different religious groups. And it's weird that disproportionately Jews are attacked by anti-Semitism. And why is that? Anti-Semitism is the oldest and most pernicious form of hate, but it's also a different form of hate. It's one where tropes that attack Jews essentially also attack our organs of state. It's an attempt to turn people against our institutions by saying Jews control the world, so you shouldn't care. And that's just not acceptable. And one of the things that we learned this year is that the Jewish community often feels that others don't recognize anti-Jewish racism or anti-Semitism in the same way that other types of racism and other types of hate are easily identified and easily condemned. It shouldn't just be Jews that are condemning anti-Semitism. We all need to do that. And so the Laith Maroof incident this year was one example where Jewish MPs were calling upon our colleagues to condemn something, and it took much too long for it to be condemned. The same is true of what happened in Toronto this weekend with the Al Quds Day affair, where people are chanting slogans for the destruction of Israel. It's perfectly okay to criticize Israel, to criticize Israel's government, but to call for its destruction is anti-Semitism. And so what do we need to do? Well, we need to make sure that everyone adopts the IHRA definition and implements the IHRA definition. That is not a controversial question. IHRA was a consensus definition adopted over years of discussion by many, many countries, including Canada. Donc, j'apprécie énormément que B'nai Brith travaille avec tous les gouvernements, tout à travers le Canada, pour adopter IHRA, et tous les gouvernements devraient l'adopter, mais non seulement l'adopter, mais implémenter. And that means we need to do a better job of making sure everyone in the civil service on down understands exactly what IHRA is and what is anti-Semitism. The second thing that I would like to just end on is social media. As everybody mentioned, the permeation of social media, the drastic expansion of social media has led to an ever-increasing amount of anti-Semitism online. And what we've learned is the platforms cannot hold themselves to account properly. They need, at this point, to have regulation. And we need to make sure that A, there's algorithm transparency. 2, we need to make sure that they themselves enforce their own codes of conduct that they themselves as private companies create. And they need to make sure that anti-Semitism in their own audits is carved out as a separate category so we can actually identify how many incidents of anti-Semitism there are. Today, no platform actually does that. I'm hopeful that all of us on this stage will be involved in the European Parliament's second summit on online anti-Semitism that is happening in June. I am proud to co-chair that group that is an international task force of legislators, but B'nai Brith has been very involved in assisting us. And I think that we need to make sure that across the Western world, anti-Semitism online is attacked in the same way that we will attack it in Canada, hopefully with legislation this year. Donc, je vous remercie beaucoup.
Merci, Anthony. Je sais que toutes les élus ici et toutes leurs partis partagent exactement les thèmes que vous avez abordés aujourd'hui. I'd like to call Melissa Lantsman, member of the Conservative Party, MP for Thornhill, to come take the floor.
Thank you, Michael and Marvin and David for being here, and thank you to my colleagues in the House, and particularly to Anthony, who is often a lone voice of reason on this file and so many others when it comes to the hallways of this building, and frankly for Jewish communities right across the country. And thank you, of course, to B'nai Brith as an organization who, for the hard work that they do day in and day out to make this audit a reality. And I know the team puts a lot of effort each year into the audit and are extremely vigilant when it comes to monitoring these types of crimes in our country. And usually the culmination of such hard work is, and the release of such a report is a cause for celebration. But I think it's clear that there is nothing to celebrate here in Canada when it comes to the alarming rise in anti-Semitism that we are faced with. We are in a crisis. And it is a crisis against Jews that have reached record levels. It is a crisis when the worst 2 years of anti-Semitism in Canada are on record were this year and last year. And while it is a crisis when the numbers double what they were just 10 years ago, there are some bright spots in these numbers. But overall, they are extremely concerning and alarming. And as a member of Parliament for Thornhill, the largest Jewish population in Canada, these audits put the numbers in words, what I, my neighbors, members of our community experience more often than most, particularly in Ontario. And if you ask any one of them, they too will tell you that it is a crisis. When children can't go to school, that are being confronted by swastikas and anti-Semitic graffiti, it is a crisis. When small businesses are harassed because their owners are Jewish, it is a crisis. And when our homes are attacked specifically because there is a mezuzah, a scroll on the door, it is a crisis. And when there is silence from trusted voices who know better, it is a crisis. And tonight marks the beginning of Yom HaShoah, the remembrance of the Holocaust. And we need to recognize that the same forces of intolerance are the ones that led to the darkest periods in history continue to rear their ugly heads in our communities. They are on our streets, they are in our schools, they are in our unions, and they are even in these hallways here in Ottawa. The alarming trend of anti-Semitic actions and their growing acceptance by ordinary people show the need to do more. Not only through the definition of IRA, again, an uncontroversial definition, I think we agree on that, online and in our communities. It is one of the oldest hatreds, but the reference point and the reason I mentioned tonight's starting of Yom HaShoah is that is in recent memory. And that memory quickly escapes while we lose first-hand accounts and survivors. And when fundamental freedoms and liberties of our society are under attack, when human rights of innocent people are under attack, inaction is not an option, silence is not an option, and lip service is most certainly not an option. And I know my friends here will continue the hard work across party lines, and I encourage all Canadians to do the same. Become an ally. Call it out when you see it. Push for powerful deterrence. Punish those who violate others on the basis of blind hatred, often disguised as anti-Zionism, as we saw on the streets of Toronto this weekend. And stand up to hatred, even if it's not hatred against you. Seek out the education on anti-Semitism, which so many organizations, including B'nai Brith, are providing in this country, and support organizations like B'nai Brith who do that vital work. Our commitment to build a safer and freer and just Canada, where Jews and members of all religions, races, and creeds are safe, shouldn't just be a once-a-year press conference. It shouldn't be a political calculation. And I'll continue to call it out no matter what the consequences are, and I'll humbly ask you to do the same, just as my colleagues have throughout their entire careers. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. I just want to note we appreciate how available you are to us and the other members of Parliament. The fight against anti-Semitism isn't a partisan battle. It must reach out across party lines. I now call on Alistair MacGregor, the member for the New Democratic Party of Canada, who represents Cowichan, Malahat, Langford in beautiful British Columbia.
Thank you very much. I'd like to, first of all, make some acknowledgements. First of all, to B'nai Brith for providing this opportunity, and I really want to take the opportunity to salute the hard work that they do each and every year in providing this extremely comprehensive report, an important report that gives a snapshot in time over the space of the last year of truly what Jews in Canada are facing. I also want to acknowledge my colleagues, Melissa and Anthony. I know they are both very dedicated towards this issue. And I think what viewers see today is a Liberal Member of Parliament, a Conservative Member of Parliament, and a New Democratic Member of Parliament standing together united against anti-Semitism, but also standing in friendship, solidarity, and as allies to the Jewish community in Canada. We do have our policy differences, but on this issue there is no daylight between us. In the introduction to this really important report, there was a specific reference made to an important report that was issued by the Standing Committee on Public Safety and National Security on ideologically motivated violent extremism, which was tabled in the House of Commons last year. I had the pleasure of being a member of that committee, and issuing that report, I think, was one of the proud moments of our committee's work. And I want to take this time to acknowledge the extremely wide array of witnesses who appeared, including B'nai Brith Canada, who lent their expertise and detailed knowledge of this subject to inform our committee's work. And in particular, I want to highlight the fact that the online space for Jews is not a safe space. 3/4 of the incidents recorded last year happened on the online space. And that's why when you see the recommendations in our report, if you take the time to read that report, you will see the detailed analysis that our committee produced, again, based on the expert testimony that we received, that details how the Government of Canada must do more to confront hate that is online. We have made a number of recommendations. I know B'nai Brith made mention of 2 in this report, but when it comes specifically to tackling online hate, and I'll echo Anthony's words here, we must do more as a government to confront social media platforms to make them accountable for how their algorithms push this hate onto people's screens. The way these algorithms are set up is that they reward content which garners lots of views. And we know hateful content, angry rhetoric, that tends to speed up the algorithmic process. And we know that there is big money to be made on this because, of course, advertising models are based on more and more views of specific content. So we have to tackle how those algorithms are pushing this hate onto people's screens. We absolutely must make sure that we are working with those platforms to make sure that they are enforcing their codes of conduct. But, you know, this is not just a responsibility of the federal government. There is clear call for partnership with the provincial governments and also the municipal levels. We all have an important role to play. So the work has been done. We have not only identified important trends and solutions in the report that we're discussing today, but the Standing Committee on Public Safety and National Security has also issued some very clear recommendations. And I think what you see today is a united stand against anti-Semitism. And I know that as a member of Parliament, I think one of the most important roles I do in my community is to stand as a role model. And when it comes to hate, that just simply has no place in how I represent my community. So to the Jewish community of Cowichan, Malahat, Langford, know that I stand with you as an ally and that I will continue to work with my colleagues from all parties to address this very troubling issue from coast to coast to coast. Thank you so much.
Merci, thank you. I particularly want to thank our CEO, Michael Mostyn, Mr. David Matus, and the MPs who were with us today, Anthony Housefather, Melissa Lantsman, and Alistair MacGregor. Pour les journalistes, for the journalists, there is a regional breakdown of number of incidents and type of incidents in the audit. If you need further information, B'nai Brith is available today to explain these numbers to you. Pour les journalistes, dans l'audit, vous allez trouver des chiffres sur nombre global des incidents dans chaque région et type d'incidents dans chaque région. Si vous avez besoin de plus d'informations, B'nai Brith est disponible aujourd'hui pour répondre. Merci encore. Thank you, everyone. This press conference is now completed.